I'm Morgan Reynolds, 32, and my world imploded at a family dinner last month. After years of saving every penny while working 60-hour weeks in finance, I finally bought my dream $480,000 beach house. It was my sanctuary, my reward for a lifetime of hard work. Then, over pot roast and mashed potatoes, my parents casually announced, "Good news. Tyler is moving into your beach house next month." My 28-year-old unemployed brother smirked across the table. The same brother who's been borrowing money since high school and never paying it back. I nearly choked on my water. My beach house? My beach house? Before I share what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family members who thought your possessions were community property. Growing up in the Reynolds household meant understanding one unspoken rule: Tyler came first. It wasn't that my parents were terrible people, they loved us both, but Tyler had a special hold on them that I never quite figured out. Maybe it was his charming smile or his ability to talk his way out of trouble, but whatever the magic, it worked consistently throughout our childhood. While I was expected to maintain straight A's, do chores without being asked, and basically function as a mini-adult, Tyler got praise for the bare minimum. A C+ on a test he didn't study for? At least he passed. Forgetting to take out the trash for the third time? He's got so much on his mind. It was a pattern that shaped both of us in profound ways. By high school, I realized no one was going to hand me anything. I started working at 16, saving half of every paycheck while maintaining my 4.0 GPA. Meanwhile, Tyler breezed through school on charm and barely graduated. When college applications came around, I earned a partial scholarship but still worked 2 jobs to cover the difference. Tyler, despite having mediocre grades and 0 extracurriculars, somehow got my parents to foot his entire bill at a private university, which he dropped out of after 3 semesters. "College isn't for everyone," my mother said, patting his hand sympathetically while the $40,000 they'd spent evaporated into thin air. I graduated with honors in finance, despite working nearly full-time throughout school. My first apartment was a tiny studio with questionable plumbing, but it was mine, paid for with my own money. Those early years taught me financial discipline that served me well. Entry-level positions became management roles. Small raises became substantial ones. My emergency fund grew, followed by retirement savings and, finally, my house fund. For 3 years, I lived significantly below my means to save for a down payment. No vacations, no new car, no fancy restaurants. When friends teased me about my frugality, I just smiled and thought about ocean views. Meeting Kimberly Santos, my real estate agent, was a game changer. After explaining what I was looking for, she showed me 7 properties before calling one Sunday morning. "I have something that just hit the market," she said, excitement evident in her voice. "It needs some work, but it's right on the water and within your budget." Barely. The moment I stepped onto the weathered deck of the 2-bedroom cottage and saw the Atlantic stretching before me, I knew. The house needed updating. The kitchen was straight out of 1992, the bathrooms were functional but dated, and the entire place needed fresh paint, but the bones were solid, and that view was priceless. Closing day was the proudest moment of my life. When Kimberly handed me the keys, I actually teared up. "You earned this," she said, squeezing my shoulder. And I had. Every double shift, every ramen dinner, every no to a weekend trip with friends had led to this moment. I spent that first night sitting on my deck with a $12 bottle of champagne, still budget-conscious, watching the waves and feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. Meanwhile, Tyler's life continued its predictable trajectory. After college, he bounced between jobs, retail, restaurant work, a brief stint at our uncle's construction company, never lasting more than 6 months anywhere. His apartment history was equally unstable, with parents frequently covering late rent or security deposits for new places after evictions. Just 3 months ago, he'd been dating Jessica Parker, a sweet, hard-working girl who seemed to genuinely care about him. They'd been together almost a year when she finally reached her breaking point after paying their rent alone for the 3rd consecutive month, while Tyler claimed to be between opportunities. Their breakup left him without housing since the apartment was in her name. This wasn't the first time I'd tried to help Tyler. 2 years ago, when he was between apartments, again, I let him stay in my spare room for what was supposed to be 2 weeks. 3 months later, I was still finding empty beer cans under the sofa and explaining to my neighbors that the noise complaints weren't my fault. When he finally left, only after I set a firm deadline, he took my favorite Bluetooth speaker and an expensive jacket by accident. All this history swirled in my mind as I sat at my parents' dining table, hearing them casually give away the home I'd worked so hard to secure. The evening had started so normally. Mom's pot roast, her Sunday specialty, filled the house with familiar aromas as I arrived, bottle of wine in hand. Dad was watching golf in the living room, barely looking up to grunt a greeting. Tyler was typically late, but that was expected. These monthly family dinners were a tradition I sometimes dreaded, but participated in dutifully. "How are the renovations going?" Mom asked as she sliced carrots. She was referring to the modest updates I'd been making to the beach house, painting the bedrooms myself, replacing some light fixtures, and saving for the eventual kitchen remodel. "Good," I replied, washing my hands to help with dinner. "I finished painting the master bedroom last weekend, that seafoam color I showed you. And I found a great deal on patio furniture." "That's nice, dear," she said absently, in the way parents do when they're not really listening. Tyler arrived just as we were sitting down, offering no apology for his tardiness. He looked rough, unshaven, hair unwashed, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt that had seen better days. But my parents lit up as if a celebrity had graced their home. "There's my boy," Dad boomed, suddenly animated. Mom rushed to reheat his portion while Tyler dropped into his chair with the air of someone doing everyone a favor by showing up. Dinner conversation flowed normally at first. Mom talked about her garden club drama, Dad complained about property taxes, and I shared stories about a challenging work project. Tyler contributed little beyond asking for the salt. Then, as Mom served apple pie, Dad cleared his throat with the authoritative rumble I'd recognized since childhood as preceding an announcement. "So, we have some good news," he said, smiling broadly. "Tyler will be moving into your beach house next month." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth, certain I'd misheard. Morgan's beach house. Tyler clarified, though his smug expression suggested he already knew the plan. "Yes," Mom chimed in enthusiastically. "Won't that be wonderful? He can have that second bedroom, and you two can split the utilities. It'll be just like when you were kids." My mind raced to make sense of what was happening. Were they joking? Was this some elaborate prank? "We figured it's perfect timing," Dad continued. "Since that Jessica girl kicked him out, and his lease is up at the end of the month." "Wait," I said, setting down my fork. "You're saying Tyler should move into my house? The house I bought? Without asking me first?" My mother's expression turned puzzled. "Well, it's so big for just one person. And it's only half the year since you're mainly at your apartment in the city." "That doesn't mean," I started, but Dad cut me off. "Tyler needs a fresh start," he said firmly. "And family helps family. That's how we raised you." I looked at my brother, waiting for him to show some recognition of how inappropriate this was. Instead, he said, "I already told the guys at the bar I'll be living beachfront. They're pretty stoked to come visit." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "You told people you're moving into my house before anyone even mentioned it to me." "Don't be dramatic," Mom said. "Of course he'd be excited. And it's just until he gets back on his feet." "Which means?" I pressed. My parents exchanged glances. "Well, we can't put a timeline on these things," Dad said vaguely. "So indefinitely," I translated. "Tyler lives in my beach house indefinitely." "It's really the right thing to do," Mom insisted, her voice taking on that martyred tone she used when she wanted to end all debate. "He's your brother." "And it's my house," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "The house I saved for years to buy. The house that's in my name with my mortgage." Tyler scoffed. Typical Morgan, always keeping score. "It's not keeping score to want basic respect for my property." Dad's face darkened. "We thought you'd be more generous. That house is sitting empty half the time anyway. Because it's my weekend home. That I worked for. That doesn't mean anyone else is entitled to live there." The conversation deteriorated rapidly from there. Mom suggested I was being selfish. Dad reminded me of all they'd done for me growing up, conveniently forgetting the college tuition they'd paid for Tyler, but not for me. Tyler sat back, watching the drama unfold with barely concealed satisfaction. When Mom announced she'd already looked into hiring movers for Tyler's things, I'd had enough. I stood up, hands shaking. "This is not happening," I said firmly. "I'm sorry if that disappoints you, but my house is not available for Tyler or anyone else to move into. After all we've done for you," Mom said tearfully. "We raised you better than this," Dad added. I grabbed my purse and left without another word, tears blurring my vision as I drove home. By the time I reached my apartment, 3 text messages from Mom had arrived, all variations on the theme of what a disappointment I'd become. Back in my apartment, I paced the living room in disbelief. Had that really just happened? Had my parents actually promised my brother my house without bothering to consult me first? The audacity was breathtaking, yet somehow consistent with our family's long-established patterns. I pulled out a bottle of wine, not the budget kind I usually bought, but an expensive Cabernet I'd been saving for a special occasion. This wasn't a celebration, but I definitely needed it. As the shock began to wear off, memories surfaced of other times my boundaries had been trampled for Tyler's benefit. The summer my parents borrowed my car savings to bail him out of jail after a DUI. The Christmas they gave him my concert tickets because he was having a hard time and needed cheering up. The countless family gatherings where I was expected to help cook and clean while Tyler played video games. Each instance had been rationalized, minimized, or dismissed entirely if I dared complain. But this was different. This wasn't a few $100s or a weekend inconvenience. This was my home, my sanctuary. I called Rachel, my best friend since college and the most level-headed person I knew. Despite the late hour, she answered on the second ring. "They did what?" she practically shouted after I explained the situation. "Told me, not asked me. Told me that Tyler is moving into my beach house," I repeated, the words still sounding surreal. "That's insane," Rachel said. As a lawyer, she didn't use such terms lightly. "They have absolutely no right. Zero. Nada." "I know that intellectually," I admitted, but they made me feel like I'm the crazy one. Like I'm selfish for not wanting my unemployed brother to take over the home I worked years to afford. "Listen to me," Rachel said firmly. "This is not a gray area. This is not you being selfish. This is such an outrageous overstep that I'm honestly struggling to believe it's real. Your parents have no legal or moral claim to your property." Her outrage was validating, but I still felt sick to my stomach. "What do I do now?" "You hold your ground," she said simply. "And maybe talk to Mason at work tomorrow. He always has good insights about family stuff." Mason Williams, my colleague in the finance department, had become a good friend over the past few years. Unlike Rachel, who'd witnessed the Reynolds family dynamics for over a decade, Mason offered a fresh perspective. When I described the situation during our lunch break the next day, his eyebrows nearly disappeared into his hairline. "Your parents told your adult brother he could move into your house without asking you." He shook his head in disbelief. "That's not normal, Morgan. Not even close." "I know," I sighed, but... "No buts," he interrupted. "There's no scenario where this makes sense. Would they give away your car? Your bank account? Where's the line?" His questions lingered in my mind through the afternoon, only to be interrupted by a call from my mother. "I hope you've had time to think about your behavior," she said without preamble. "Your father and I are very disappointed." "Mom, I'm at work," I replied, stepping into an empty conference room for privacy. "This is more important than work. This is family," she insisted. "Tyler is counting on moving into the beach house. He's already given notice at his apartment." The presumption stole my breath. "He did what?" "Mom, I said no. Very clearly. We thought you'd reconsider once you had time to think it through. Family helps family, Morgan. I have helped Tyler. Many times. But giving him my house is not happening." She sighed dramatically. "Well, you need to tell him yourself then. And explain to your father why you're abandoning your brother when he needs you." The conversation left me shaking, which only worsened when my phone chimed with a text from Dad. "Already told Tyler it's handled. Don't make me regret raising an ungrateful daughter. That night, I barely slept. The weight of familial expectation and emotional manipulation left me tossing and turning until dawn. At work, I couldn't focus, missing details in an important presentation and earning a concerned look from my supervisor. By Friday, I was a wreck. I scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Laura Griffin, the therapist I'd been seeing periodically since a workplace burnout scare last year. Your reaction is completely normal, Dr. Griffin assured me after I recounted the situation. What's abnormal is your family's expectation. Then why do I feel so guilty? I asked, twisting a tissue between my fingers. Because you've been conditioned to prioritize your brother's needs above your own. It's a pattern established in childhood and reinforced throughout your life. She leaned forward slightly. But recognize this, saying no doesn't make you selfish or heartless. It makes you a healthy adult with appropriate boundaries. My parents won't see it that way. Probably not, she agreed. People who've benefited from your lack of boundaries rarely applaud when you establish them. The question is, are you willing to endure their disapproval to protect yourself? It was a question I carried with me to the beach house that weekend. I'd planned the trip before the family dinner fiasco, but now it felt like a pilgrimage, a reminder of what I was fighting to protect. The familiar creak of the front porch steps, the salt air, the distant rhythm of waves. Every sensation reinforced why this place mattered to me. I spent Saturday painting the guest bathroom, the simple task providing meditative calm. As evening approached, I noticed Elaine Hoffman, my 60-something neighbor, tending her impressive garden. On impulse, I walked over to introduce myself properly. We'd waved in passing, but never really talked. "It's lovely to finally meet you," she said, offering lemonade on her porch. Something about her grandmother energy made me confide my situation. "Family," she sighed after I finished. "They can be your greatest joy and your deepest wound." She gazed thoughtfully at the ocean. "My sister tried something similar with her son and my cottage in Vermont. Thought I should share since I was divorced and only one person." "What did you do?" I asked. Told her absolutely not. Elaine chuckled. "We didn't speak for 3 months. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is not rescue them. Your brother needs to stand on his own feet, not move into yours." Her words stayed with me through the night and into Sunday. As I drove back to the city, I made a decision. It was time for a clear, unambiguous family meeting. No more texts, no more phone calls. We would address this face-to-face, once and for all. The following weekend arrived with a knot of anxiety lodged firmly in my stomach. I'd arranged the family meeting at my parents' house, neutral territory that wasn't my apartment or the beach house in question. Ethan, my boyfriend of 2 years, insisted on coming for moral support. "You don't have to do this," he said as we drove to my parents' suburban home. "Not if it's going to cause you this much stress." "I do though," I replied, gripping the steering wheel. "If I don't address this clearly, they'll keep pushing. And, honestly, this is about more than just the house." Ethan reached over to squeeze my hand. A software architect who approached problems with logical precision, he'd helped me prepare for this conversation, role-playing potential scenarios and helping me craft responses that were firm, but not inflammatory. "Remember," he said as we pulled into the driveway, "you're not asking permission. You're stating a decision that's already made." My parents' home looked exactly as it always had, Dad's meticulously maintained lawn, Mom's cheerful flower beds, the welcome mat that had greeted me through childhood, adolescence, and now my adult years. It struck me suddenly how much I still wanted their approval, despite everything. Inside, the tension was immediate. Mom offered perfunctory hugs, while Dad merely nodded from his recliner. Tyler arrived 15 minutes late, sliding into the room with manufactured nonchalance. He offered Ethan a half-hearted fist bump before sprawling on the sofa. "Thank you all for meeting today," I began once we were settled in the living room. I'd practiced this opening several times, determined to start strong. I wanted to address the conversation from dinner last week about Tyler moving into my beach house. "There's nothing to address," Dad interrupted immediately. "It's a simple family matter." "Actually, there is," I continued, my heart pounding. "I want to be very clear. Tyler cannot move into my house." Not next month, not ever. Mom's face crumpled into an expression of hurt that had worked effectively on me since childhood. I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. It's just until he gets back on his feet. Which has been the case for how many years now? I asked, trying to keep my voice gentle but firm. I love Tyler, but his housing is not my responsibility. Oh, here we go, Tyler groaned dramatically. Morgan the martyr, always keeping tabs on what she does for everyone else. That's not fair, Ethan interjected, his normally calm voice tight with tension. Tyler snorted. No offense, dude, but this is family business. Ethan is here as my support, I said. And he's right, this isn't about keeping score. It's about basic respect for my property and my boundaries. Dad leaned forward in his chair. When you were kids, if Morgan had something Tyler needed, we taught you to share. That's what family does. Dad, I'm not talking about a toy or a sweater. This is my home. A home I saved for years to afford while working full-time and putting myself through college. I took a deep breath. When Tyler needed money for his car repair last year, I helped. When he needed a place to stay after the breakup with Melissa, I helped. But giving him my house is not reasonable. It's not giving, Mom protested. It's sharing. And only until he gets back on his feet, I finished. Which, based on history, could be months or years. And even if it were only a week, the answer would still be no. That house is my private space, not a family resource. The conversation quickly spiraled. Mom moved from hurt to tears, dabbing her eyes with a tissue she'd seemingly prepared for this purpose. Dad's face reddened with anger as he listed sacrifices they'd made for me throughout childhood, everything from driving me to piano lessons to buying school supplies. We went without so you could have opportunities, he said, voice rising. And this is how you repay us. By not giving my 30-year-old brother a free place to live. I asked incredulously. How is that repayment for my education that I paid for myself? Or the car I bought with my own money? Or the apartment I rented while putting myself through college? Tyler, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. I've already told everyone I'm moving to the beach. I've already packed half my stuff. My lease ends in 2 weeks. That's not my problem, I said, surprising myself with my steadiness. You made arrangements to use my property without asking me. That's on you, not me. See? Mom cried. Heartless. Your own brother could be homeless, and you don't even care. The word hit me like a physical blow. Heartless. Was that really how they saw me? He won't be homeless, I said quietly. He has a job. He can find an apartment he can afford, just like millions of other adults do every day. I can't believe what I'm hearing, Dad said, shaking his head in disgust. We didn't raise you to be this selfish. It's not selfish to maintain healthy boundaries, I replied, echoing Dr. Griffin's words. Tyler stood up abruptly. Save the therapy talk. The real issue is you've always been jealous that Mom and Dad love me more. The room went silent. We'd never acknowledged this dynamic so openly before. That's not true, Mom said weakly, but her eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. Isn't it? I asked softly. Tyler gets endless chances, endless support, endless forgiveness. I've worked for everything I have, and the one time I say no, I'm heartless. You're twisting things, Dad insisted, but there was a flicker of recognition in his expression. I'm not giving Tyler my beach house, I stated with finality. That decision is not changing. If that makes me heartless in your eyes, I'll have to live with that. As if on cue, Mom began sobbing in earnest. Dad moved to comfort her, shooting me a look of profound disappointment. Tyler stormed out of the room, but not before delivering a parting shot. Just remember this moment the next time you need anything from this family. For several minutes, the only sounds were Mom's sobs and Dad's murmured comfort. Ethan's hand found mine, squeezing gently in silent support. I think we should go, I finally said, rising from my seat. Dad looked up, his expression hard. If you walk out that door without changing your mind, don't expect things to go back to normal. You're choosing property over family. No, I corrected him. I'm choosing healthy boundaries over unhealthy expectations. There's a difference. As Ethan and I drove away, I felt simultaneous grief and relief washing over me. In the passenger seat, I finally allowed my own tears to fall. You did the right thing, Ethan said softly as we headed home. Then why does it feel so terrible? Because setting boundaries with people who've never respected them is one of the hardest things you can do. He was right, but understanding that intellectually did little to ease the ache in my chest. I'd stood my ground, but at what cost? The silence that followed the confrontation was deafening. 3 days passed without a word from any family member. No calls, no texts, not even the passive-aggressive memes Mom usually sent when she was upset. Under normal circumstances, I might have welcomed the break, but this silence felt ominous, like the stillness before a storm. On the 4th day, my phone chimed with a notification from Facebook. My Aunt Patricia, Mom's sister, had tagged me in a post. Family should always come first. So disappointed in those who forget where they came from. Hashtag family over everything. Though she hadn't named me directly, the timing and sentiment were unmistakable. Within hours, the post had collected a dozen sympathetic comments from extended family members, most with only a vague idea of what had happened, if they knew at all. That evening, my cousin Stephanie called. Unlike the rest of the family, Stephanie had always been reasonable, perhaps because her career as a family therapist gave her insight into dysfunctional dynamics. So, she began without preamble. Aunt Diana and Uncle Robert are telling everyone you're throwing Tyler out on the street and refusing to help family in need. I groaned. Of course they are. What version are they sharing exactly? According to them, Tyler lost his apartment through no fault of his own, and you're refusing to let him stay in your empty vacation home, temporarily despite having plenty of room. She paused. I'm guessing there's another side to the story. I spent 20 minutes giving her the unfiltered truth, Tyler's history of financial irresponsibility, my parents' presumption, the way they'd announced his move-in as a fait accompli. That sounds more like the aunt and uncle I know, Stephanie sighed when I finished. They've always had massive blind spots when it comes to Tyler. What should I do about the family gossip campaign? Nothing, she advised. Engaging just legitimizes it. Anyone who matters will either ask you directly or reserve judgment. I tried to follow her advice, but over the next week, the situation escalated. My mother's bridge club friend happened to see me at the grocery store and mentioned how family troubles can be so difficult. My father's brother called to check in and spent 10 minutes subtly suggesting I reconsider my position. A childhood friend texted to ask if everything was okay because she'd heard things were rough with the family. Then came the ambush. I was working from home on a Thursday afternoon when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing in the hallway, with Tyler behind them, surrounded by 3 large suitcases and several boxes. My hands shook as I opened the door. What is this? We're here to help Tyler move, Mom announced, her tone suggesting this was a perfectly normal visit. Move where? I asked, though I already knew the answer. To your place for now, Dad said casually. Just until the weekend when we can drive him to the beach house. They tried to step forward, but I blocked the doorway. We've already discussed this. The answer is still no. Morgan, don't be ridiculous, Mom said, her voice rising. We've driven 2 hours to get here. Tyler's stuff is packed. His old apartment is already rented to someone else. None of which changes my answer. I'm sorry you wasted a trip, but Tyler is not staying with me or at my beach house. Tyler pushed forward. Just let me crash here tonight at least. We can figure out the rest tomorrow. No, I said firmly, surprised by my own resolve. I can help you find a hotel if you need one, but you're not staying here. What followed was 20 minutes of escalating drama in my apartment hallway. Mom cried. Dad threatened. Tyler alternated between pleading and insulting me. Finally, when it became clear I wasn't budging, they gathered Tyler's belongings and left, my mother's parting words ringing in my ears. I don't even recognize you anymore. The barrage continued over the following days. Text messages demanding explanations. Voicemails from Mom alternating between tears and anger. Emails from Dad with links to news stories about homeless young people, with subject lines like, "Is this what you want for your brother?" Then I received a notification from my beach house security system, the basic camera setup I'd installed after purchasing the property. Someone had delivered a stack of flat-packed moving boxes to my porch. The delivery person wasn't familiar, and there was no company logo visible on their clothing. Alarmed, I called my neighbor Elaine. "Would you mind checking if those boxes are still there?" I asked after explaining the situation. "I'm worried someone might be trying to move in while I'm not there." "I'll go right now, dear," she promised. 20 minutes later, she called back. "The boxes are gone, but there's something else you should know. A young man who looks like the brother you described was here earlier. He was showing someone around the outside of your house." My blood ran cold. "Did he go inside?" "I don't think so. I watched pretty carefully after I saw them. But he was definitely acting like he belonged here." I thanked her and immediately called Rachel for legal advice. "Change your locks immediately," she instructed. "And document everything. The unwanted delivery, the unauthorized visit, all of it. If necessary, we can file for a restraining order." That weekend, I made an emergency trip to the beach house. The locksmith was already changing the locks when I arrived. After he finished, I did a careful inspection of the property. Nothing seemed disturbed inside, but when I checked the small shed where I kept beach equipment, I found several boxes that weren't mine. Opening one revealed Tyler's gaming console and collection of controllers. Another contained his winter clothes. A third held framed posters and personal mementos. He'd already started moving in. Hands shaking with anger, I called him. "Why are your belongings in my shed?" I demanded when he answered. A pause. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me, Tyler. I'm standing here looking at boxes of your stuff that somehow made their way into my locked shed." Another pause, longer this time. "I might have dropped a few things off last week when I was checking out the place." "Checking out," I sputtered. "You have no right to be on my property without permission, let alone store your belongings here." "Chill out," he said dismissively. "Mom and Dad said it would be fine." "It is not fine. I'm putting these boxes on the front porch. You have until tomorrow to pick them up, or they're going to Goodwill." I hung up before he could respond, my whole body trembling with rage and disbelief. Less than an hour later, as I was photographing the boxes for documentation, Tyler's car screeched into my driveway. He jumped out, face flushed with anger. "What the hell, Morgan?" he shouted, storming toward me. "You changed the locks?" "Yes," I confirmed, standing my ground despite my racing heart. "Because you clearly don't respect boundaries. Mom and Dad promised me I could stay here. They said it was handled. It was never theirs to promise. This is my house, Tyler. My name on the deed, my mortgage, my property taxes." "You've always been so selfish," he spat. "You know I need this place way more than you do. Need or want. Because from where I'm standing, you've never needed anything. You've just wanted it and expected everyone else to provide it." His face darkened. "You don't understand. I've got debts you don't know about. Serious ones." Something in his tone gave me pause. "What kind of debts?" He looked away. "Just some bad luck with cards. And sports betting. But I've got it under control." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. "Is that why you were so desperate to move here? To hide from creditors?" His silence was answer enough. "Tyler, I can help you find financial counseling or look into debt consolidation, but you cannot live here." "That's final." He grabbed one of his boxes roughly. "Mom and Dad were right. You don't care about anyone but yourself." As he loaded his belongings into his car, I noticed Elaine watching discreetly from her porch. When Tyler finally drove away, tires spitting gravel, she walked over with a mug of tea. "You okay, honey?" I shook my head, tears finally breaking free. "My own family thinks I'm a monster for not letting my gambling addict brother move into my house." She wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "Family dynamics are complicated, but from where I'm standing, you're the only one showing any sense in this situation." After Tyler left, I discovered another disturbing detail. When chatting with another neighbor about installing a fence, he casually mentioned, "Your brother said you two were going to be co-owners once he moved in. Said he'd be handling the renovations while you covered the mortgage." The deliberate campaign of misinformation staggered me. Tyler hadn't just planned to move in. He'd been actively creating a narrative of co-ownership among my neighbors. That evening, Jessica, Tyler's ex-girlfriend, called after hearing about the confrontation from mutual friends. "I need to tell you something," she said hesitantly. "When Tyler and I were still together, He told me his parents were buying him a beach house for his 30th birthday. I found the listing for your place in his browser history. He'd been looking at it for months before you bought it. My mind reeled. Are you saying he wanted my specific house? I think so, she admitted. He used to talk about how he deserved a place like that, how it would fix everything if he could just live at the beach. She paused. Morgan, there's more. His gambling debts are worse than you probably realize. He owes some people, well, let's just say they're not the type to negotiate payment plans. As we talked further, a chilling picture emerged of Tyler's financial situation and his plan to use my beach house as both escape and solution. According to Jessica, he'd been telling his creditors that he was coming into property soon. He'd even suggested hosting poker games at the beach house to win back what he owed. By the time I returned to my apartment Sunday night, I felt physically ill from stress and betrayal. This wasn't just about an entitled brother wanting free housing. It was about a deliberate, calculated plan to take over a property I'd worked years to afford. The weeks following the confrontation at the beach house took a toll I wasn't prepared for. Sleep became elusive, my appetite vanished, and my normally precise work suffered. After mixing up figures in an important client presentation, my supervisor called me into her office. Morgan, this isn't like you, she said, concern evident in her voice. Is everything all right? I gave her the sanitized version, family conflict, some property issues, nothing I couldn't handle. She suggested taking a few personal days, which I reluctantly accepted, knowing that time alone with my thoughts might not be the healthiest option. At home, the walls seemed to close in. Ethan tried to help, bringing dinner and offering distraction, but even our relationship was showing strain. You're not present, he said gently one evening as we sat on my sofa, a movie playing unwatched. I'm worried about you. I'm fine, I insisted automatically. No, you're not. He took my hand. You're not sleeping. You're checking your phone constantly for messages from your family. You flinch every time the doorbell rings. This isn't sustainable, Morgan. He was right. The situation had consumed me, seeping into every aspect of my life. My parents' silence had morphed from a relief into a different kind of pain, the gnawing uncertainty of where we stood, whether reconciliation was possible. Then came the flying monkeys. Childhood friends reached out, clearly dispatched by my mother to check on me and subtly suggest I reconsider my position. A distant cousin called to remind me how family is all we really have in the end. My father's brother emailed about how disappointing it was to see the Reynolds family in turmoil, especially over something as trivial as property. Each interaction left me more drained, more isolated, more doubtful. Was I the unreasonable one? Was a house, even one I'd sacrificed for, worth this family fracture? In the midst of this internal crisis, Allison Cooper, my friend since elementary school, texted asking to meet for coffee. Unlike the other childhood connections who'd reached out recently, Allison and I had maintained a genuine friendship over the years. I heard some things through the grapevine, she admitted when we met at our favorite cafe. Your mom's been talking to my mom about how ungrateful you've become. I stared into my untouched latte. Let me guess, I'm a heartless monster who won't help my poor brother. Something like that, she confirmed. But knowing your family dynamics and Tyler's history, I figured there was more to the story. I gave her the unfiltered version, including Tyler's gambling debts and the attempted move-in. Her eyes widened. That's wow. And your parents are still taking his side. Completely. They've always seen him as the victim, no matter the situation. Allison reached across the table to squeeze my hand. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. But I'm worried about you. You don't look well. I'm just tired, I insisted. It's more than that, she said gently. This is consuming you. She was right, but I didn't know how to step away from a conflict that followed me everywhere. That evening, I received a text from Tyler that simply read, "Hope you're happy. Thanks to you, I'm sleeping on Dave's couch with no permanent address." Before I could process this latest guilt trip, my phone rang with my father's number. Surprising myself, I answered. "Morgan," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Your mother is beside herself. Is this really the hill you want to die on? Your brother's happiness for a house you barely use. Dad, we've been over this." The beach house is not an option for Tyler. Well, you should know that without a permanent address, Tyler can't apply for the job he was counting on. His entire future is in jeopardy because of your selfishness. I bit back a retort about how Tyler's future had been in jeopardy long before this latest drama. I'm sorry to hear that, but… No buts, he interrupted. You've made your choice very clear. You've chosen property over family. I never thought I'd say this, but we always knew you'd abandon us once you got some money. The words hit like a physical blow. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, he snapped. Just remember this conversation the next time you need your family. The call ended abruptly, leaving me shaking. I curled up on my sofa, phone clutched to my chest, and finally allowed myself to really cry, deep, racking sobs that seemed to come from someplace primal within me. Hours later, exhausted and hollow, I checked my email to find a message from my mother with the subject line Family Legacy. The body contained only a formal letter, written in language so cold and detached it might have been addressed to a stranger. Dear Morgan, it is with profound disappointment that we acknowledge your decision to prioritize material wealth over family bonds. Your refusal to assist your brother in his time of need demonstrates a fundamental betrayal of the values we attempted to instill in you. As you have made your position clear regarding family obligations, we are formally notifying you that we have removed you from our will and family trust. Additionally, the family heirlooms currently in your possession, including Grandmother Reynolds' silver and the antique desk in your apartment, should be returned at your earliest convenience, as they were always intended to remain within the family. We hope someday you will recognize the gravity of your choices. Sincerely, Diana and Robert Reynolds. The formal disowning, because that's what it was, sent me into a panic attack so severe that I called Dr. Griffin's emergency line. She spoke with me for 30 minutes, guiding my breathing and helping me regain some semblance of calm. Can you come in tomorrow? She asked. I have a cancellation at 2 p.m. The next day, I sat in her office, the letter pulled up on my phone. They're punishing me like a disobedient child, I said, voice hollow. All because I won't let Tyler move into my house. Dr. Griffin read the letter carefully, her expression remaining neutral. When she finished, she set my phone down gently. Morgan, what we're seeing here isn't a normal family conflict. This is a pattern of emotional manipulation and financial exploitation that's been normalized in your family system. What do you mean? In healthy families, adult children are allowed, expected, even, to have autonomy over their own resources. Your parents' reaction suggests they view your property as a family resource that they have authority to allocate. They've always been that way with Tyler, I admitted. Whatever he needs, the family provides. I just never thought they'd try to give away my house. That's because you've established independence, which they respected until it conflicted with the family's primary dynamic, caretaking for Tyler. She leaned forward. Morgan, the question you need to ask yourself isn't whether you're being selfish. The question is, why do you still seek approval from people who consistently devalue your boundaries? Her words resonated deeply, touching something I'd never fully articulated, my lifelong quest for parental approval that had always remained just out of reach. That night, lying awake at 3 a.m., I contemplated giving in. Just saying yes, letting Tyler move in, accepting whatever destruction followed, all to stop this excruciating family rupture. The temptation to surrender was overwhelming, a siren song promising relief from the constant pain. But as dawn broke, something shifted within me. I realized that caving now wouldn't just cost me my beach house, it would cost me my self-respect, my autonomy, and ultimately my well-being. The pattern would never end. There would always be another demand, another expectation, another sacrifice required to maintain family harmony. For the first time, I truly understood that this conflict wasn't really about a house at all. The morning after my sleepless night brought unexpected clarity. As I made coffee, a phrase from my conversation with Dr. Griffin kept repeating in my mind: financial exploitation. On impulse, I opened my laptop and typed family financial abuse into the search bar. What I found was illuminating and validating. Countless articles, forums, and resources describe dynamics eerily similar to my own family situation. Adult children expected to subsidize siblings, parents making financial decisions for adult offspring, emotional manipulation when financial boundaries were established. One article in particular caught my attention: financial abuse, when family members feel entitled to your assets. The more I read, the more I recognized my family's patterns. This wasn't just annoying sibling favoritism, it was a documented form of family dysfunction with real psychological consequences. Armed with this new understanding, I began to formulate a plan, not just to protect my beach house, but to reclaim my agency in the entire family dynamic. First, I called Rachel. As both my friend and a lawyer, she was uniquely positioned to help. "I need to legally protect myself," I explained. "My family situation has escalated beyond what I expected." We met for lunch that same day, where she helped me draft a formal cease and desist letter addressing the attempted move-in and unauthorized access to my property. "This isn't about taking legal action against your family," she explained as we worked. "It's about creating a paper trail and showing them you're serious." Most people back down when they see official letterhead. Next, I made an appointment with a family therapist specializing in adult family conflicts, separate from my individual sessions with Dr. Griffin. Dr. Rivera couldn't help with my immediate situation, but she provided valuable resources for navigating family estrangement, a possibility I was beginning to accept might be necessary, at least temporarily. "Estrangement isn't failure," she assured me. "Sometimes it's the healthiest option while all parties work on themselves." I spent the next day documenting every interaction related to the beach house situation: texts, emails, calls, visits. I backed everything up to a secure cloud account and shared access with Rachel. If things escalated further, we'd be prepared. Security became a priority. I upgraded the systems at both my apartment and the beach house, adding cameras and changing all access codes. I also checked and strengthened all my financial security, changing passwords and adding two-factor authentication to every account. As I took these concrete steps, something unexpected happened. I began to feel empowered rather than victimized. Each action reinforced that I had options beyond simply enduring my family's manipulation. My cousin Stephanie called midweek, eager to check in. "I've been worried about you," she admitted. "The family gossip machine is in overdrive." "I can imagine," I sighed. "What's the latest version?" "That you've abandoned Tyler during a crisis, and that Aunt Diana and Uncle Robert are heartbroken by your cruelty." She paused. "But there's something you should know. This isn't the first time they've done this." "What do you mean?" "Remember Uncle James? Dad's younger brother?" I vaguely recalled a family uncle who had distanced himself years ago, becoming the subject of hushed conversations and head-shaking at family gatherings. "The same thing happened with him," Stephanie explained. "He refused to co-sign a loan for Tyler after college, and Aunt Diana and Uncle Robert orchestrated a family freeze-out." It wasn't just about the loan, though. It was about James questioning the family dynamic. This revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. I wasn't the first family member to be ostracized for establishing boundaries with Tyler. There was a historical pattern I'd been unaware of. Armed with this knowledge, I reached out to another source of insight: Jessica, Tyler's ex-girlfriend. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe far from my usual haunts, away from potentially prying family eyes. "Tyler's problems are worse than you know," she confided after we'd settled with our drinks. "The gambling is just the surface. He's got at least $20,000 in credit card debt, plus the money he owes to less formal lenders." "How did you find out?" "I found collection notices hidden in his gaming console, the one place he thought I'd never look." She twisted her napkin nervously. "When I confronted him, he admitted everything but swore he had a plan to fix it. Said his parents were getting him a beach house where he could start fresh." "This was before I even bought the place," I realized aloud. Jessica nodded. "Months before. He talked about it constantly, how this house would solve everything. I think in his mind, it was already his." This conversation filled in crucial pieces of the puzzle. Tyler hadn't just opportunistically latched onto my beach house. He'd been eyeing it, or something like it, as his salvation for months. My parents hadn't just made an impulsive decision to move him in. They'd been part of a longer-term plan to solve Tyler's problems by giving him my property. That weekend, I took decisive action. I drafted a clear, comprehensive email to my entire family, parents, brother, and extended relatives who had been drawn into the situation. The message was firm but not inflammatory, setting clear boundaries around my property and my expectations moving forward. I ended with, I value family, but not at the expense of my own well-being and autonomy. I hope we can eventually rebuild our relationship on healthier terms, with mutual respect for each other's boundaries. After sending it, I blocked my parents' and Tyler's numbers, not permanently, but for a designated 2-week cooling-off period that I specified in the email. I needed space to regain my equilibrium without constant emotional bombardment. During those 2 weeks, I focused on rebuilding my life outside of the family drama. Ethan and I spent a peaceful weekend at the beach house, where I finally completed the guest bathroom renovation I'd started months earlier. The simple act of creating beauty in my space felt surprisingly healing. I reconnected with friends I'd been neglecting during the crisis, including a dinner party with colleagues where I laughed for what felt like the first time in months. Mason from work was particularly supportive, offering both empathy and the valuable perspective of someone completely outside my family system. You know what's striking about your situation, he observed as we grabbed lunch one day. How your family treats your boundaries as a personal attack rather than a normal part of adult relationships. His comment highlighted something I'd never fully articulated. My family didn't just disagree with my boundaries. They interpreted them as deliberate acts of aggression, as betrayals of family loyalty. By the end of the 2-week break, I felt stronger and clearer than I had in months. When I unblocked the family numbers, there were surprisingly few messages waiting, a testament to how effective clear boundaries could be. My father had sent a single text that simply read, "We'll talk when you're ready to apologize." My mother had called twice, but left no messages. Tyler hadn't reached out at all. The relative who surprised me most was my Aunt Patricia, the one who had posted the passive-aggressive Facebook comment. She'd sent a thoughtful email acknowledging she'd only heard one side of the story and offering to listen to mine. We met for lunch, where I calmly explained the full situation. I had no idea, she admitted after hearing me out. Diana only said that you refused to help Tyler when he needed it most. It's more complicated than that, I replied. And I'm not asking you to take sides. I just want the misinformation to stop. To my surprise, she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. You know, you remind me of James. He always had boundaries too, and the family never forgave him for it. I wish I'd understood then what I'm beginning to see now. That conversation was the first crack in the united front my parents had built against me. In the following days, other relatives reached out, curious about my side of the story. I kept these conversations factual and unemotional, avoiding the temptation to vilify my parents or brother. The most significant breakthrough came during an unexpected encounter with Tyler himself. I was leaving my office building when I spotted him waiting by my car. My first instinct was to turn around, but something, perhaps my newfound resolve, propelled me forward. Tyler, I acknowledged coolly. What are you doing here? He looked different, subdued, with dark circles under his eyes. Can we talk? Just for a few minutes. Cautiously, I suggested a nearby coffee shop, public enough to feel safe, private enough for an actual conversation. Once seated with our drinks, he surprised me by getting straight to the point. I found an apartment, he said. It's not much, but it's mine. I signed the lease yesterday. That's good, I replied, uncertain where this was heading. And I got a job at Dave's construction company. Started last week. He stared into his coffee. It's hard work, but it pays decent. I'm glad to hear that. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us until he finally spoke again. I was really angry at you. Still am, kind of. But Jessica talked to me. Jessica. I echoed, surprised. Yeah. She reached out after hearing about everything. Said some things I needed to hear. He shifted uncomfortably. Anyway, I wanted you to know I'm not going after your beach house anymore. That's over. Relief flooded through me, tempered by caution born from years of broken promises. What about Mom and Dad? Are they still expecting you to move in? He grimaced. They don't know about the apartment yet. Or the job. I wanted to get everything set up first. For the first time, I recognized something new in my brother, a flicker of independence, however tentative. We weren't reconciled, not by a long shot, but something had shifted. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. By taking concrete actions to protect myself, legally, financially, emotionally, I had altered the entire family dynamic. The crisis wasn't resolved, but I was no longer drowning in it. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. 2 months after the initial confrontation, I stood on the deck of my beach house, watching waves roll toward shore in their eternal rhythm. The property that had become the center of such intense family conflict now felt peaceful again, a sanctuary rather than a battleground. The path to this moment hadn't been straightforward. After my unexpected coffee with Tyler, things had evolved in ways I couldn't have predicted. True to his word, he had maintained his apartment and job, showing a consistency that surprised everyone who knew him. Our relationship remained cautious and limited, but civil, a significant improvement over the hostility of recent months. My parents had been a more complex story. When Tyler informed them about his apartment and job, their initial reaction was disbelief, followed by attempts to convince him he was making a mistake. You could be living at the beach, my mother had apparently insisted. But when Tyler stood firm, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, they'd been forced to adjust their expectations. Their relationship with me remained strained. After a month of minimal contact, my father had called with what he considered an olive branch. We're willing to move past this if you are. No apology, no acknowledgement of boundaries crossed, just an expectation that we would return to the status quo. I'd responded carefully, I'm open to rebuilding our relationship, but we need to address what happened rather than just pretending it didn't. This had led to an uneasy détente, occasional text messages, brief phone calls on birthdays and holidays, but nothing approaching our previous closeness. Dr. Griffin assured me this was normal and potentially healthy. Real reconciliation can't happen without recognition of the underlying issues, she'd explained. Your parents need time to adjust to the new reality, one where they can't control your resources or decisions. Stephanie had become an unexpected bridge between family factions. Having experienced similar dynamics with her own parents, my aunt and uncle, she understood both sides and helped translate perspectives without judgment. Through her, I learned that my parents were slowly, very slowly, beginning to recognize their overreach. Aunt Diana mentioned feeling bad about how things went down, Stephanie reported after a family gathering I hadn't attended. It's not an apology, but it's something. The most significant healing, however, had come from within. Through continued therapy, I'd gained insight into the family patterns that had shaped me, particularly my lifelong quest for parental approval and the guilt I felt when prioritizing my own needs. Understanding these patterns didn't magically resolve them, but awareness made them easier to navigate. The watershed moment came during a cautious family dinner, the first since the confrontation. My parents had suggested meeting at a restaurant, neutral territory, and I'd agreed, with Ethan accompanying me for support. Tyler came alone, arriving precisely on time, another small but noticeable change. The dinner began awkwardly, with stilted conversation about safe topics, the weather, a cousin's new baby, Dad's golf game. Then, as dessert arrived, my mother cleared her throat. I've been thinking about your beach house, she began, causing me to tense immediately. Ethan squeezed my hand under the table. It's very nice. You've done wonderful things with it. Coming from my mother, this simple acknowledgement of my property as truly mine was revolutionary. I thanked her cautiously. Maybe we could visit sometime, she continued. If that would be all right. Just for the day, of course. I'd like that, I replied, genuinely surprised and touched by this small but significant shift. Dad, not to be outdone, added gruffly, that paint color in the living room. The blue, it's good. Suits the place. These weren't apologies or explicit acknowledgments of wrongdoing, but they represented something important, the first tentative steps toward respecting my boundaries around my property. Later that evening, as Ethan and I discussed the dinner, he observed, "They're trying in their way. It's not perfect, but it's progress." He was right. The deeply ingrained family dynamics wouldn't change overnight, but small shifts could eventually lead to meaningful transformation. Tyler's evolution had been perhaps the most surprising aspect of the past months. The job at his friend Dave's construction company had given him structure and purpose he'd previously lacked. When I ran into Jessica at a mutual friend's birthday party, she shared her own observations. "He's different," she said. "Not completely, but enough that it's noticeable." I think hitting rock bottom when everyone expected you to bail him out was actually the best thing that could have happened. This insight resonated with something Dr. Griffin had told me early in the crisis. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is not rescue them. As weeks passed, I cautiously invited Tyler to visit the beach house for a day, not to live there, but to enjoy it as any guest would. I'd expected reluctance or residual resentment, but he accepted with what seemed like genuine appreciation. That visit proved surprisingly healing. As we walked along the shore, he apologized, awkwardly but sincerely, for his role in the conflict. "I convinced myself I deserved your house," he admitted. "That somehow it should be mine because I wanted it so badly. That was messed up." "It was," I agreed. "But I appreciate you saying that." We weren't magically transformed into the close siblings we'd never really been, but something new was developing between us, a tentative mutual respect that had previously been absent. My relationship with Ethan had emerged stronger through the crisis. His unwavering support had revealed the depth of his character and commitment. "You stood your ground when it would have been easier to cave," he told me one evening as we relaxed on my deck. That's not something everyone can do. The beach house itself had taken on new meaning. Once simply a symbol of financial accomplishment, it now represented something more profound: my capacity to establish and maintain healthy boundaries, even under intense pressure. Each improvement I made to the property, from the fresh paint to the new deck furniture, felt like an affirmation of my right to create the life I wanted. I'd also developed a deeper appreciation for chosen family versus birth family. Friends like Rachel and Mason, neighbors like Elaine, colleagues who'd supported me through the worst of the crisis. These relationships had proven their value in ways I hadn't fully recognized before. The most profound change, however, was internal. Through this painful experience, I developed a clearer understanding of my parents' patterns and why they had always favored Tyler. Their own insecurities, their fears about his ability to function independently, their need to be needed, all had contributed to the dynamic that had shaped our family for decades. Understanding didn't excuse their behavior, but it helped me respond to it with greater compassion and less reactivity. I could now see them as flawed humans doing their best with limited emotional tools, rather than as all-powerful parental figures whose approval I desperately sought. As I watched the sunset from my deck that evening, I realized that the peace I felt wasn't just about the beach house situation being resolved. It was about a deeper, more fundamental shift in how I valued myself and my right to self-determination. The journey had been painful, but the lessons learned were invaluable. I had discovered that standing firm in the face of pressure wasn't selfish. It was essential for genuine self-respect. That family love, while precious, shouldn't require the sacrifice of personal boundaries. That sometimes, the most loving action isn't giving people what they want, but holding space for them to grow through disappointment. Most importantly, I'd learned that my worth wasn't tied to my family's approval or anyone else's. It came from living authentically, making choices aligned with my values, and having the courage to protect what mattered to me. As the last light faded from the sky, I felt profound gratitude for this house, yes, but more for the journey it had unexpectedly taken me on. A journey not just of protecting property, but of reclaiming myself. Have you ever had to stand your ground with family over something important to you? What helped you stay strong? Share your experience in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about navigating complex family dynamics. If you found value in this story, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries, even with those closest to us. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is honor your own needs.